standard simplex is going to come in many flavors as we go through the rest of chapter 5, but we're going to start off with standard simplex, okay? Um, so, what is the point of simplex? What are we doing? Well, the good news, simplex is literally what we were just doing in section 5.2. It solves linear programming problems. And so if you remember, that just means it's all it is doing is figuring out if things are a max or a min. You're solving those types of problems, max and mins, when you have constraints, when you have things that you are subject to. Um, so that's what we're going to be focusing on. Now, to be able to use standard simplex, there are three requirements that must be met. First of all, standard simplex only does maximums. So if the problem's asking you to find a minimum, we're out. We're done. We can't do it. And that's what's coming in another section. So don't worry. Okay, the next, all variables must be greater than or equal to 0. So meaning like in the last section where I talked about real world constraints where I said x has to be greater than or equal to 0, y has to be greater than or equal to 0, that has to be true as well. So if you are doing a problem where, let's say you're finding profit, and where profit could be a negative number, you could lose money, then you can't do this. So these problems, this method only works where if all your variables are greater than or equal to 0, no negative solutions are allowed. Okay, and then third, all of your constraints must be less than or equal to a number greater than or equal to 0. What on earth did that just mean? Well, so here's an example. All right, let's go through our checklist. Checklist number 1, it's a maximize. Okay, checklist part number 2 um, is that all of my variables, I have x's and y's, all of them are greater than or equal to 0. Okay? And then 3, here's the little bit confusing one, but once you see it, it totally makes sense. All the constraints, so that these are my subject to's, these are my constraints, but we don't worry about this. These we really don't think as constraints. We just think of those as defining my real world constraints, my real world. I can't have negative cars, that kind of thing. So here, all your constraints must be less than or equal to, so notice here, less than or equal to, less than or equal to, less than or equal to, a number greater than or equal to 0. Well, is 6, 4, and 4 greater than or equal to 0? Well, yes, they are. So therefore, we're good. Now, you may be wondering why the phrasing like that, because it may say it's something slightly differently in the book. Well, let's just pretend we had something like this. If this was our constraint, now notice we have a greater than or equal to, but it's a negative number. And if you remember back from algebra, we'd say, okay, to make it fit objective 3, what I'm going to do is multiply everything by a negative 1. So that gives me negative x minus 2y, but when we multiply by a negative, my sign flips, and now I have a value greater than 0. So having this requirement just makes sure that things are written in the right way. So we're always checking, and also to make sure that they're not hiding something on me. So, for example, I could write something like this, where I could say it's less than or equal to negative 4. And you'd say, yes, it's less than or equal to. Well, it's not really, because when I turn this number positive, that's going to flip the sign and make it greater than or equal to 4. And it's no longer a standard problem. Now it's a general problem, which comes in the next section. So that's the idea on this, is what we're looking for is these numbers that are highlighted in purple all have to be positive, or 0. 0 is fine too. And they have to be less than or equal to signs. We're not going to try and trick you, especially here in section 5.3, or in the standard simplex, depending on your book. But our goal isn't to trick you. It's just to get you looking at what you need to be looking at. Okay? Now, here's the process for doing standard simplex. Okay. Now, it's easiest if I work through a problem while we talk through this. So let's go ahead and make that a whole separate video so we can start from here and watch it over and over, and we're not starting in the middle. So I'll see you at the next video.